Hi, my name is John McGowan. I'm the creator of GMath the GMath Google add-on for both Docs and Sheets. Today I'm going to show you a little bit about two of the main functions of GMath, the create math expressions and create a plot. So let's first start off with create math expressions. So the GMath came about because I had students who were taking notes digitally and they had a difficult time representing complicated mathematics in their notes. So what it uses is a LaTeX which is a typesetting language, and that renders the mathematics in a nice visual way. So here there's a LaTeX box where you enter all your LaTeX, and this is a preview of what the LaTeX renders. If you click Insert, it takes the preview and puts it in your document wherever your cursor is. Now let's say I wanted to go ahead and insert. I might say solve for X. And I might notice that I don't like to have that solve for X. I'd like to be a different way in there. So I can actually clear this and I can use the programming boxes here. So when I click on regular text, just a little bit of formatting, it shows me how to use LaTeX with regular text. If I didn't use the regular text, if I would have just said solve for X, it thinks it's all one mathematical word. So I can't use it that way. So the regular text box allows me to actually have it be text. And whatever you put in the box, it does instantaneously. So you might notice here that I have a broken image from my LaTeX preview. There are a few different times where the preview will give you a broken image. One is if there's nothing in your M box, but once I put some text in there, like solve, it creates it. Another is if I have it too much. And so if I put too much text into this LaTeX box, it breaks the renderer. So you can see it also will pretty much auto-update, but there is a little bit of lag behind it. If it keeps going, you might see another problem here, is that the preview window overflows, so I have to scroll over. That can be a little awkward, but I do feel like it's useful to have the preview there to see what you're doing. So if I keep going a little bit more, you can see that I eventually broke my image, and that just goes from my renderer. It just won't go really long images. I'm trying to write my own API to help fix that, but it's a long go because I've never done it before. So let's go ahead and I want to get rid of all this. I don't want to highlight. I can just hit the little clear button and it'll clear my box and clear the preview. And so let's go ahead and if I click regular text, then I can go ahead and delete that part and put solve for X. And then I can now put my math on the outside. So I want to put a fraction there. So I can use these I pre-programmed a bunch of LaTeX buttons. So if I want to do a fraction, I click on that button and it puts it all at the end. And so I can just change the A to 3. And I can take and put X minus 2 in there in the denominator. And let's go ahead and put that in. I do notice that I made a mistake, but that's okay. Once I insert it into my document, it'll take a minute to render the image and then put it in the document. You'll notice that it'll also replace an image if I highlight an image. So it puts it in there. And now let's say I notice like, oh, I wanted to have a 3 on top. So a new feature I have in this version is if I click on the image and then click on edit from doc, it'll actually bring that back in here and populate it again so I can edit it. Notice I wanted to put a 3, so I just delete the 2, put a 3, and I can come over here, highlight that image, hit insert, and it'll actually replace that image or insert it over top of there. So that's a huge feature, I think, to be able to edit my spacing. So there's a couple different things that I want to talk about there. So let's say I want to go ahead and solve for X. Here, I can have my students do that. Now, throughout here, I put some other LaTeX buttons that I felt were useful. If you have some suggestions that you'd like, go ahead and hit me up with a question on Twitter at jmacattack or on google.com/John McGowan, and it'll go to my Google+. A lot of these are put from suggestions of previous users of GMath. And so one of the things that I have a lot are the quadratic formula is a complicated expression to put in, or also piecewise functions. So let's say I also wanted to represent a piecewise function. What I could do is I clear it, and then I just click on this, and I'll bring that piecewise function in there, and you can see that it has all that formatting that's necessary. And so I can insert that into the document as well. And so all it is it does images using LaTeX to render that in there. And you might notice there too, the preview took a little bit of time to come up, but the insert worked as well. So I can easily change this if I want by just clicking edit from doc, and it'll pull it back in, and then I can edit it. For instance, if I wanted to have 3x minus 2 squared, you can see that I can put in there and then replace it with the insert. So that's the main feature of creating the math expressions. let's say that I wanted to go ahead and do like a quote math worksheet that if I wanted to like say my Algebra 2 class, I might say something like creating a problem if I want to talk about functional analysis. So I might say that I want to have my students give the domain and range of a specific function. And so let's say I do y equals, so I'll say, and so another thing is the new line. If I click on new line, it works either in or outside of the text box. It's a double slash that it works in there. And I can put it in to give me a little bit of better spacing. So let's say I want to do g of x equals, and then I want to put a fraction again. So I'm going to do the fraction of x squared over, notice I use the caret here for squared, and now I'm going to use the x squared part here for the x to the a, because that does give me my correct syntax there. So I'm going to use x squared plus 1. And so I want to find out, I'm going to have my students solve this problem, we'll say, and give the domain and range of the following function. And then now let's say like, oh, I forgot I wanted to have them sketch the graph as well. So if I click on this, I can pull it back in and put an extra thing in there. Let's say, I say, I'm going to put an M. So another thing is when I click a button, it always goes at the end. That's unfortunate, but I can't do anything about that. It's a Google thing. So I might say sketch the graph as well. And then I want to put another new line in there just for better spacing. So there. So now I'm going to put it back in there and replace that document. So now the other, I'm going to go ahead. So you can see that there's a bunch of buttons in here to pre-populate. If you need better LaTeX advice, there's a great websites to use. CodeCog is a really nice one. DOM equation editor as well. I gave some resources in the help page where you can find out that by going to add-ons, GMath, and get help. And in the help, there's some good LaTeX resources. So let's say I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to use the other aspect as well of the GMath, which is to look at graphs. So I'm going to do GMath, hit create a graph. So for creating a graph, I do need to put functions in there. I can graph multiple ones. I just need to separate them with a comma. And it has a lot of the same features. I put my function in here. So here I can't pull them in from my document yet because that's an expression. I can only pull in graphs. So I'm going to need to put in x squared over x squared plus 1. I don't have the LaTeX here, so I'm going to have to put them in parentheses, so it's going to be a little bit cumbersome, but it should still work. And so if I want to see what that looks like, I can also look at the viewing window here. So I click on preview, and this should show me the graph of x squared over x squared plus 1. And it does expand beyond the window here, which is unfortunate, but that's all I have for the sidebar. So I click on here, I need to do insert, and it's going to put my graph in there. And so now I can, if I wanted to, I could change my domain and range by, let's say, and I only want to go from like -5, or let's say the positive. I go 0 to 10 and 0 to 10. So if I click preview again, it'll look only at my first quadrant, and then I can just insert that over top of that. So that'll give me just a first quadrant view. For some reason, sometimes I get this insert inline image. It's null. It's not there because the preview worked. I just click on insert again, and then it usually works. That's, I think, a Wolfram call thing, but I'm not quite sure what's going on there. So if you get that error, that's not really a problem because I know the preview's there, so it can get the image. So I don't know why that does that. So it's either a Google thing or a Wolfram thing, but I don't know what the image is there. And so that's one of the ways that I can use my expressions. Let's see, let's put it in. And so now I have this expression in there for my graph. And so I can then talk about the domain and then the range, and then I can have my sketch my graph. And so I can see that my domain is all real numbers, and then my range is going to go from 0 to something, and that I would have my students talk about. So I do like that viewpoint. One other thing I want to talk about now is, so we'll clear that graph, and let's think about some functional analysis. I want to see what happens for a transformation of a graph. And so I have a bunch of pre-built ones here. Let's look at some of the trig functions. For instance, let's look at sine. If I click on sine, it throws the sine of x up in here. And so I want to look at sine of x and then sine of x plus 2. I want to see what happens when I put the plus 2 on there. So if I preview that, it goes from 0 to 10 and 0 to 10. And so it shows me those. Let's say I wanted to change my window to -10 to -10 and then preview it again. It'll show my images. Now I have some options here. Notice that there's a legend down here. If there's more than one function, you can have the choice to put the legend down here. And that is an optional feature that's all the way at the bottom. So I can have a legend of the functions plot. If I click no, it won't show that. If I click yes, by default it does. I also by default put a y-axis, and then I can do a line of best fit if I optionally put some points in here as well. And so let's say I want to insert that into the graph. I click insert, and then it allows me to put that into my document. And so I can see here that the sine of x plus 2, sine of x and then plus 2 is just 2 units I translated above. And so I can actually check and see like what happens if I make that a 4, and I see that that second function just keeps on moving up. So I think that's a valuable way to visually see the difference in transformations. I can also see what happens if I do the 4 on the inside. So sine of x times sine versus sine of 4x. So if I preview them, it'll still do the sine of x since it's the first function in the blue, and I can see that the 4x, it didn't change the amplitude at all, but it did change the period, which I think is a valuable thing to see. Now let's say that since I'm doing trig, I can also use my x minimum maximum. I can go from like -2 pi to 2 pi, and so that's helpful that I can use pi as well, and then we'll just go from -2 pi to 2 pi. So I'm allowed to actually even use pi in there for my axes, for my restrictions and what I want to put in there. So let's throw that graph in there as well. And so that's another nice feature that I think is I can change my min and my max of my graph to any specification that I want. So let's go ahead and explore what happens if I put some points on there. So let's say I want to go back to my first graph of sine of x and then 2 plus sine of x. I can click edit from the dock and it'll bring those back in there, as well as change the zoom regions as well back to what is in this specific graph. So let's go ahead and put a point in there. Let's put the point 0. And so the only thing that's different from normal math is I have to put braces in here. So I put 0 and then I'll put 0 and then pi. And so when I put 0 and then pi, I want to also plot this on here. I'm not going to do a line of best fit, but now when I do preview, it'll graph the point 0 comma pi. And so I can see that 0 comma pi is right up around there. And so I can put as many points in here as I want. So let's do 1 comma and then maybe pi over 2 as well. So all I have to do is I separate all the points that I want in braces with commas. So I'll do, let's do pi and then pi over 4. And so if I want to see those points, I can click preview again, and it'll put those points on there. Now, if I want to find the line of best fit between those, let's throw that into the document as well. So I click on the insert button, and it'll put it into my document. And so one of the things I want to see is like, well, now line of best fit or find the trend line there. So I can just click this option for yes, and when I preview my graph now, it'll actually create the line of best fit between those 3 points and plot it as well. So let's insert that in there. And it does keep the legend. It does not put the line of best fit equation in there yet. That's something I'm still working on. And so those are some really great features, I think. Now, one of the things that I know that a lot of teachers like to do is they want to give a blank graph for students to work on. So if I just clear my graph here and I won't plot a function, let's just look at what I only wanted to plot points. So if I don't put any functions in, I can put as many points in as I want as well. And let's not do the line of best fit. And so if I just put the points in, clear my functions, and look at preview, it'll plot only those points. And I can still just fit my graph window. Let's say I only want to look at the first quadrant again. Let's say first and fourth quadrants. And so if I click preview, then it'll give me the first and fourth quadrants just of those points. And so I can insert in there. And so I think that's a really nice feature to just be able to plot points. And if I wanted to plot points as well as a line of best fit, it'll do that as well. And so that's odd. I don't know why it does that. Maybe it's my internet connection. We'll see if it comes back, and if not, we'll put it in there. We'll put it in there again just for good purpose. And let's say that I didn't put that back in there. And say I wanted to show, one thing is you can build a blank graph. So if I clear all my points and then clear my functions, there's nothing in there. I can make a graph of any size. So say I wanted to make it from -5 pi to 2 pi. And then from -2 to 2. then I can preview and it'll create just a blank graph. And so then I can have students put, maybe if I wanted to print that out and give them a quiz and have them virtually graph that by hand, I can plot something. So that's a nice way to create blank graphs with any axes that you want. So let's go ahead and click on this one and see, well, what was the problem there? If I hit edit from doc and I pull it in, it still remembers everything that was in there and it'll make my graph as well. So if I click edit from doc, it'll populate that in there and bring it in. Oh, maybe it did not. It didn't like the. It didn't like it. No, it did. For some reason, it didn't put the attributes down. So it did graph it, but for some reason, it's not showing up in there. And so that's one of the best ways. So I built a bunch of things, functions in here, and some mathematical constants like pi, I. If I want to do like the absolute value of x, it throws it up there, and I can look in just because I needed to put my point in there as well. So let's see. Oh, it was pulling them in there. Okay, so if I want to look at that, I can just do the absolute value of x. And so it does, I put these through the Wolfram Cloud. So that's what the button does, is it builds those up. So that's how you can use my different features for ggraph, which is part of GMath, to create plots. So yeah, I feel like it's really helpful. If you have any features that you'd like to see, I'd like to have you let me know either in the help comments, or you can send me a tweet at jmacattack, or also to google.com/John McGowan. Okay, thanks again. I really appreciate it.